Yeah, I'll get that to y'all as well. Okay, perfect. So we're at 11:30. I think we can, just to be respectful of everybody's time, I think we can go ahead and get started. So I'll just start kind of in the upper left here with Simpa Kisalita. So I'll go ahead. What we're going to do today is we're going to have everyone, the panelists are going to introduce themselves, and then we'll open it up for questions. I'm expecting a lively discussion today. So why don't you, Simpa, why don't you go ahead and go and introduce. Oh, I should turn my video so you can see me. All right. Hey. I'm not a got the background here, so yeah. All right, Simpa, go in and why don't you introduce, kind of tell them about your background, where you are now, and kind of what, whatever you want to tell them, I guess.
Sure. My name is Simpa Kisalita. I graduated from the MBB program in May of 2019. Since then, I've been working in Austin for a company called Molecular Templates, which is a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company which primarily works on developing novel therapies in oncology.
Cool. My name is Tariq Taylor. I am an alumnus of the MBB program 2014. I currently work for Sartorius, which is a vendor in field. I'm a field application scientist in fluid management technologies. I'll tell you all about what that is. And I am located in Houston, Texas. Funny thing is, Simpa, you're one of my clients.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Oh. And then I guess we should also mention Tariq is an alumnus of Morehouse College. Is that like a football rival? I didn't know if that was a football rivalry or anything. Or...
I don't know if we play Albany. I know it's Albany. I don't know if we play him every year, but I think we played him in the past. So yeah, once I found out that this was for an HBCU. I mean, obviously I do this panel for anybody, but HBCUs are very near and dear to my heart. And I actually have COVID right now. I got COVID from my alma mater's homecoming this last weekend. So wish me luck. If I sound a little froggy, it's because I'm sick. But
all right, well,
love you guys.
Yeah. All right. So we have Darcy. Can you hear us, Darcy?
Oh.
Hey, Darcy. How are you?
I'm great.
Good. So
how are you all doing? Good to see you, Tariq.
Hi, Darcy. I can't contain my smile. Good to see you.
Great to see you.
Yeah. So yeah, I was just at the workshop this week with Chris. So it's good to catch up with Chris Prather, Darcy's wife. And
up in DC, you were at that workshop?
Yeah. So Dr.
Awesome.
Prather, Chris Prather, she's a faculty at MIT, and so she led the biomanufacturing workshop that I was at in DC this week. So Darcy, we're just doing some introductions now. So maybe tell us about yourself and Calion.
My name's Darcy Prather. I'm CEO of Calion. David was just talking about Chris Prather. That's my wife. So she's a professor in chemical engineering, and we joined sort of our backgrounds together to launch a company called Calion that does biomanufacturing of a molecule called glucaric acid. My own background, I did MIT undergrad. I grew up in St. Louis and then went to MIT, where I studied electrical engineering and science, technology, and society. And then I went to Oxford on a Rhodes and did philosophy, politics, and economics. So I could not stay focused. I'm all over the place. My wife was super focused. Combine those two, and we're able to launch Calion together.
She is also one of the best note takers that I've ever seen. She took all the notes for this workshop. She was just like going crazy. I mean, and they're all organized like bullet points and just really excellent. So yeah. All right. Well, that was a great introduction. So what I just did with the participants here was I went through my kind of biomanufacturing spiel. We had some questions from the audience. I've been using Slido, but I'm not seeing any specific questions. So maybe we can just, you all want to either tell me that I can repeat that back to the panelists. So I'll just open the floor up for questions now. Or you can put them on Slido if that's easier. If you want to be anonymous or whatever. Yes. So the question is for Tariq. So as a field application scientist, can you just go into your role or what that looks like your job functions?
Sure. So just to give you a background in general, so within the industry, you have the kind of PhD master's scientist side of R&D and even transferring that technology to manufacturing. So you have that side. Then you have the manufacturing side, right? And those two, they speak to each other. But one other side of the industry that people don't really talk about is a lot sometimes, in my opinion, I don't feel like I really knew about it a lot, is the vendor side, right? So I'm a vendor. And what that allows me to do is, well, it depends on what role you choose. But if you choose a technical position within an industry vendor, you're able to be a scientist while also interacting and networking and building your network and also building your skill set, wearing multiple hats at once, So what I do as a field application scientist, I'm in the field teaching people how to apply the science of the product that I have, okay? If you think about it like that. So I may do pre-sales. A pre-sales scenario would be Tariq going to do a demo, or a conference, and I'm demoing or presenting to a bunch of people who don't know about the product. Pre-sales, they haven't bought it yet, right? Then there's also post-sales. If you've already purchased it, you need training or something like that. I'll come to your company and I'll do a training for you. So those are the usual things I do. And then there's day-to-day stuff. I work from home. I blurred out my background, but I did want you to see that I'm at home because I think that's an important part of this. If you're the kind of person who is a good self-starter, likes the idea of working from home and working remotely, this would be could potentially be a good position for you. I will say, I miss people. I miss going into a place and seeing the same people every day. Dr. Blum was one of those people that I saw every day for years and years and years. And that kind of stuff really does also help to build your network. So if you are into that, going into like a brick and mortar place, I think that's still a great thing. But if you're open to the idea of traveling and working from home, I think this position would be a great opportunity. I hope I kind of gave an idea of the rundown of my position. In a nutshell, I teach customers and clients how to use the products that will help make their own processes more efficient.
Great answer. And that ties in one of the earlier questions that talked about remote work. Maybe anybody from the panel, what type of remote work positions do you think exists in biomanufacturing?
I'll tail end just in case you guys miss something. There's something. Yeah, you guys go ahead.
I'm so glad you're coming out of your shell, Tariq. You're normally so shy and
It's the COVID just making me come out.
Yeah, go for it.
Me?
Yeah.
So,
who?
Well, from my point of view, there's when you think about remote work, you have to think about what are the skill sets of things that you have that you're able to provide remotely. So obviously we're talking about manufacturing. Most of manufacturing, you got to be at the site, right? Now the site can be in interesting places and what have you, but ultimately you generally need someone to crank the lever or turn the lever. Now that it is becoming a place in which you can do more things slightly remotely. And what do I mean by that? So the level of automation in a facility is increasing. And so with that increase in automation, that does allow for folks to be slightly more flexible, right? So maybe you don't have to physically be in front of the machine anymore. You can be sitting back in the office or the control room, but still they generally want you on site. So then within biomanufacturing, if we think of it as an industry, frankly, most of the jobs can be done outside of the factory, right? So if you're trying to build a company, you got your sales team that Tariq was just talking about. And that sales team, that support team, much of their day they can spend remotely, no problem. Even when you think about much of what the scientists do, there's a piece in which you got to be in the lab. You got to have the shake flasks and the titers and the beakers and individually pour and shake and do whatnot. But increasingly, if you need to do some background research on, well, what am I not thinking about? Let me do a scan and see what knowledge already exists on the web. Or if you're looking for knowledge on the web, you can be at home or you can be at the office. So those are opportunities, again, for flexibility in what needs to be done. So if I think about my team, we do nearly everything remotely. Now, we get away with it because we got places like the BFF that David runs who do some of the hands-on things, so that limits us. But at the same time, the thinking of the project that we believe that we're putting in, that can all be done remotely. We were doing remote work before it was cool, so to speak. So a lot of our investors and business partners are like, oh no, COVID, are you guys gonna be able to adjust and work remotely? Like, we've already been doing it for 5 years. It's not a big deal. A lot of people said it's a big deal, but if you're genuinely interested in the work, it's not a big deal. It is more challenging for people who are not genuinely interested in the work. And when they're at home, they therefore lack the discipline to sit, get the work done. They hear their favorite song, they get distracted. Oh, was that a bird? What was that sound? Let me go investigate. So if you know you have that, don't look for remote work. If you're easily distracted, don't do that to yourself. Find an office and go in. So
Well said.
those are a few comments on that.
Yeah, and Simba, do you have anything to add? I know your job is probably mostly in the lab, I'm assuming.
I am on site pretty much every day. But I will say my company, since COVID, I believe there's still a third of the people working remotely. So there are people that can work from home, and then, there are the people that still have to come on site like me. I will say I have seen more and more work from home jobs or remote work jobs. So they do exist. But for me, I'm definitely on site. I got to be there.
Now, Simba, are you there
Sorry.
are you there every single day? Or do you, some days you're in and some days you're out? What's your...
It depends. When I'm doing fermentations, I usually have to be there, but when that's not going on, I can work from home.
Question for you, Simpa. So those positions that are becoming more increasingly remote, are those typically manufacturing positions? Are they QA positions, or what kind of positions are those?
Those are usually so in my company, a lot of the HR, a lot of the finance people work from home, but then you have directors that can do most of their job from home, and they will have some scientist on site. But even now, a lot of those scientists will work from home for the majority of the week, come in, run their experiments, and then they'll,
Got it.
come back home and do the data analysis.
So the typing, the computer work can be done from home. I think, Darcy, what you said was really important about building a skill that can be leveraged remotely. I had to kind of cut my teeth and, as they say, pay my dues at a CMO in Baltimore. Actually, before I moved up there, I called you, Darcy, and I really appreciate that conversation to this day.
Oh,
so yes. So I went up and worked for a CMO, a contract manufacturing organization, which is actually what the BFF is in at UGA. And I was able to build skills that directly helped me pivot into remote work. So I think that is still a very important point that Darcy made about building a skill that can then be leveraged for remote work.
Other questions? Yes.
Moving from academia to so there are things that could be it could be influences from the data analysis of
The what side? Rosie's, okay. Yeah. So the question is, what are the challenges in moving from academic research to industry? And I guess whoever wants to take that on.
Simple, why don't you go? Because I didn't go straight to industry. Oh, yes, I did. I actually did. I went to CMO, but Simple, you go.
I think the mentality is a little different. I think in academics, a lot of times you're exploring these ideas, but in industry, you have a deliverable, you have a product you have to get out. And so there's not always time to kind of just keep playing around with it. You got to bring something to market. You have to make money. So I think the drivers are different in some respects, and the day-to-day can also be different.
All right.
So to sort of highlight the difference, I'll talk about just for a second how people present information in business and the optimal way for business versus the optimal way for academics. This isn't universally true, but I think it's broadly true. So for folks who've come straight from academics, whether it's undergrad or grad school or even high school, you tend to want to tell the story of how hard you've worked to come to this creative answer. So you might present what the problem was on a slide, and then you'll have a few more slides explaining how super clever you were and all these really cool experiments you did. And then you get to the answer. You're like, so this is what I did, and this is why it matters. In business, on that first page, you better tell somebody why it matters. So you say, here's why what I did mattered. I increased things tenfold, and therefore we're going to make more money. And that needs to be on slide 1. That does not need to be on slide 10. It needs to be on slide 1 so people pay attention to what you've done. And then once they know it matters and kind of how it matters, they'll happily listen to all of your great creativity and how you got there. But that in many ways encapsulates what Simba was just talking about, having a deliverable. A deliverable is, give me something that matters to my business. And you talk about that up front when you do a business presentation, but you can often talk about that at the end on an academic presentation because you want to explore the deliverable in many ways are the ideas. So you want to really talk about, I looked at this idea and that idea, and all of that really is part of the deliverable as an academic. At least that's my point of view.
Yeah, and then the other side of that was, what do you like better about industry versus academia? Kind of what's the rosier side of industry?
Happy to take that. So the rosier side definitely is, industry businesses in general, they operate for profit, right? So just based on that alone versus the model of an institution, academic institution, they have two different motivations, right? A motivation of an academic institution isn't to just solely make money, unless you're the University of Georgia. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But they do a really good job at making money at UGA. So they do. So the reality is that you're not going to have the same cap, right? They actually are, they're incentivized in industry to give you the money that you need. Right. So a part of it is of the better part is there's more money in industry, of course. But like I said, the thing about academia is the amount of networking that you can do there, and the level of skill development, especially skill development without having to have the investment that you would need in other places. Whether it be, for instance, at UGA, the kind of hands-on work that I was able to get on bioreactors, the kind of ability to be able to make a mistake and things like that. We're talking about deliverables, we're talking about bottom lines in industry. There's no room for mistakes. Not only that, they also make your your ability to impact a conversation limited, right? They don't want you to be able to mess up the bottom line, right? So you're supposed to focus on an SOP and not at all deviate from this SOP, okay? And in that, actually, that's one of the major differences right there. Academia, you're actually getting to the bottom of a question. And you will do whatever it takes to find the positive solution to that question. Whereas in industry, you might know how to fix something, but if it's not according to the SOP, you might get some pushback, right? They want your
What's an SOP again? I
Oh,
don't know.
that's right.
The
Thank you.
audience
Thank
would-
you so much. Okay. An SOP is a standard operating procedure. You could think of it as your recipe for creating that product that Simple was talking about, right? So once you take it from the lab to manufacturing, they want to have this recipe as figured out as possible, okay? They don't want anybody that thinks that they know what to change that no, okay? And if you do change anything from this standard operating procedure, it's called a deviation, okay? And you don't want to have deviations. So with that being said, industry, they don't really need you to be a thinker when you're on the manufacturing floor. You're an executor, you're an operator, you're not a thinker. Whereas in academia, you remain a thinker. And I think keeping that ability, keeping that badge of a thinker, I think that is important, and it will serve you throughout the rest, even if you go into industry. I hope I said a lot, but I hope I covered a lot.
Now, I will just speak to that whole comment about deviations from SOPs. There's nothing that as a company frustrates us more if our vendor that we're partnering with deviates from the SOP. So like, you did what? Now, sometimes they happen to do something that we like, but in general, if you need to make a change, we're like, you got to check in with us. You got to check in with us. And hopefully you get to a company in which the distinction of the value of ideas and the importance of your ideas, that absolutely true of academia versus industry. But in industry, it is about the process. So there is a process to deviate from the SOP. And you have to follow that process, get the authorization, and all that can be a pain in the butt. But if you are able to provide that intellectual contribution and it actually impacts the bottom line, it's really valued. But it is harder to get someone to accept it and do it versus academia, as I was mentioning before, what they value are ideas, and the fact that you're contributing new ideas is more immediate in terms of that positive feedback and reward for your deviation of ideas.
All right, we have a question from the audience.
Yes, so my question is, like you're very clear that
Okay,
so
yeah.
How diverse is like the field in manufacturing?
Okay, so the comment was, it sees like y'all know each other, which I think maybe I don't know if Simpa's met Darcy before, but what are the what's kind of the landscape as far as diversity in this field, which I mean it is pretty broad, but what does that look like?
Well, so diversity is a big word, you know. Companies will use, you know, especially depending on where you are, they'll use whatever demographic they have to leverage their diversity, right? But when we're talking about diversity right now, I think we're talking about Black people in biotech. And the reality is that we're moving towards biotech, okay? With programs like this, I'd say our curve is definitely going up. I'm not saying that we've reached even close to saturation point. That's not where we're at. But I think our curve is going up. I just came from Baltimore, right? That's where I was living. I was living in Baltimore, Maryland. This is one of the largest populations of urban Black folks, right? And there were a lot of people moving into manufacturing, right? From the African American community. Okay, so depending on where you are in the demographics of your area, I think that impacts more of the diversity than absolutely anything. But in the past 10, 20 years ago, it was looking pretty bleak. But nowadays, like I said, our curve is going up. So now is the time to invest in it. Now is the time to talk to your community about biotech, and because you want to go in lockstep with that curve. So to wrap it up, we are still in need of more representation, but there's never been a better time, and I believe that that's changing for the better now.
So I'll just comment. I think it's at the higher levels, it's generally reflective of what you would expect. So African Americans get maybe 1 or 2% of the PhDs in the country, and then that's what you see in terms of the high level technical skills, broadly speaking. It's reflective of our nation at large if we're talking about diversity based on being African American or not, as a simple example. But to Tariq's point, a lot of the manufacturing, people are very interested in heading to the South into places like Georgia that are near the feedstock supplies. When I speak to other CEOs who've embarked on building facilities in the US, having qualified, trained people in their facilities has been their #1 challenge in terms of building their manufacturing base and their manufacturing capabilities. They are talking about, there's one that's actually in Georgia, and it's like, that is his biggest battle, is finding people who are willing to do the basics. He's like, I'm willing to do the training that's necessary, but I need someone who's willing to show up every day on time and just do the basics. It's not necessarily high-level intellectual skills. They want that if you have it, but it's not the opening requirement. And they're certainly going to pay attention if you show that you can do these other things. Same thing, there's a CEO I know who had a facility in Louisiana. He said, my #1 challenge was just getting people who could do the basics. And they were adjusting, in the African-American community, unfortunately, there are a lot of people who, for right or wrong, have a mark on their record that makes it more difficult to for corporations to accept you as a job applicant historically. And they were saying, I kept loosening that and I still could not find the qualified people. So I am super excited about what's happening in the state of Georgia and the fact that they're getting in front of the curve and giving people the training. Because I only know of more CEOs who are trying to figure out, where am I going to put my manufacturing? How am I going to find people who are willing to work? Now, maybe it's not happening in Georgia, just in Georgia. It might also be happening in Iowa, Nebraska. But if you're willing to have that flexibility in terms of location, I assure you there are opportunities in which people do not care about your skin color. They just want to know, are you going to show up on time every day? And if you can't show up, let me know. Give me a notice a week or two.
Let me know now. Yes.
Right? Give me a week or two so I can plan, so I can just know if you're going to. But, just not showing up, that does not work, especially in a manufacturing environment.
Can I add anything to that, Simpa?
I think you guys covered it very well. I don't know if I have much to add.
All right. Other question? Yes. Yeah.
So we see a lot of mechanisms. So even the days where somebody has to monitor the person over the time, so now we are in a stage where it automatically senses changes. So, how is this development going to be? So the question, the real question what is coming to here is how sustainable jobs are going.
Okay.
It's a hell of a long question.
So how did they see the industry some years back, and then how do you think that it's going to be?
Hope you all heard that. It sounded like you did.
We didn't hear
I'll repeat.
any of that.
Okay, I will repeat. I will try to repeat. So basically, the question was about automation and jobs. And so, what is the impact of automation as far as on the industry and as far as jobs? You know, where things are becoming more and more automated. How is that going to impact the number of jobs and kind of the type of jobs? I guess, is that kind of sum it up? Yeah. Okay.
Well, I got something to add. So automation, when you think of automation, sometimes you think of like an Amazon warehouse in the future and Wall-E or something where like there's no human beings and everything's on a conveyor belt. Automation in biotech still does require execution a lot of the times from a human being, right? So you may have an automated, we'll say a bag filler, something that aliquots goes, something that goes from 50. What was that?
An Amber 250.
An Amber 250. Okay, that's a good example, which would allow for high throughput screening of different cell culture conditions, right? So if you were able to, even with that, you're increasing your throughput with the automation. You still have to execute a lot of these things, right? So automation is a tool to allow for operators and people, whoever are using, working in facilities, to improve the efficiency of their job, not necessarily to take their job. I haven't seen very many robots taking people's jobs too much, but I have seen them making people's jobs easier, right? So if you were to maybe extrapolate that into the future, I still don't see it taking very many of the jobs away, especially because of what Darcy said, right? In terms of the need for manufacturing personnel that can be relied upon. As long as that need is still so high, the automation portion actually is very helpful, in my opinion. I think that was the question. How does automation impact workforce?
Right. Excellent. Anybody else wants to add to that?
Sure. Even now in my job, we are trying to automate some of our processes. And there are certain challenges that we come across where we just need someone there still. So we can automate part of it, but we still need the operator. We still need someone with the skills and the know-how to make it fully work correctly. So I think I agree with Tyreek. I imagine automation will eventually take some jobs, but I don't see it, not where we are now, not at the level we are at now. I think I agree. It's more of, it just helps the individual be more efficient, do more with their time.
And I think somebody mentioned this comment about know-how. I mean, when you do increase in automation, the intellectual content does tend to increase, right? It tends to give the individual more flexibility. Maybe I don't have to stand at the machine anymore. I can be in an air-conditioned environment that's nice and quiet and comfortable, rather than a smelly, what was that smell?
Yes.
Going on. But it does, the importance of your training and that you might be getting at Albany State does increase, because there's a higher expectation of you sort of understanding the basics of now what's hidden from you, of what's going on. So it can become more difficult to recognize that there is a problem when you rely upon automation. And so therefore you have to, it helps to understand the fundamentals more. It's not essential, but it certainly helps.
We had a question. Well, she was actually first. Of the pathway, what was the first part of what got their interest? So the question is, what got your interest in biomanufacturing, and what tips do you have for students that are interested in going into this field? Is that okay?
I'll go first.
Simba, go first.
Okay,
Let's
I was waiting.
Come on now.
Simba, go first.
Well,
Good
maybe
question.
talk about your path, like how you found this program, or the MBB program, maybe.
Yeah, I kind of just found it online, and it spoke to a lot of my interests, the MBB program. I had done fermentation. I used to make alcohol, like make beer and wine, and it spoke to an interest I had there. And then when I came in and actually interviewed for the program, saw the facilities, to me, it seemed like this was exactly what I wanted to do. I think there's a couple things that appealed to me was the business aspect, the ability to take MBA classes and also get a practical skill set. To me, these two things combined would empower me to do much more than just getting, I don't know, I think just a master's in science. So I think the opportunity that, going through the program would allow me to have in the future is what really drew me in. And when I got into the program, I really fell in love with the fermentation, the problems that you can solve, how to solve them. It's just, to me, it's endlessly fascinating. Was there another part of the question?
And what tips you would have for someone that wants to get into one of these type of programs?
I would say go for it. If you're interested, try it out. Specifically talking about the MBB program, I think it's you get out what you put into it. So I would say just go ahead and jump in and give it your all. I don't know. Yeah.
I agree. Sempa, what was your undergraduate in?
Biology.
Okay, cool.
And how much of an impact did your dad have on? Because you didn't mention it, but your dad's a professor at UGA in biochemical engineering. So how much of an impact?
Oh, I remember that last name.
Yeah.
Ugandan, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Yep.
Honestly, well, when I was younger, I used to work at UGA. I used to work in the biorefinery and anaerobic digestion lab. And I think doing those things also helped me want or led me to this program. When I saw it, I think it reflected things I've done in the past, things that have interested me in the past. But ultimately, I don't think I really made the connection to what my dad does and what I would then be doing until afterwards. And it's like, oh man, we're actually very close together in what we do now.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Great.
I love that. I'll add some stuff. Okay, so I came definitely from a different perspective from that. I had a Bachelor of Science in Psychology, actually. So I know, right? So now you see why I talk like this. So Bachelor of Science in Psychology. So I was doing hard science courses, trying to figure out where I was going to pivot this degree into, whether it be hard science or business. And the research that I was doing was looking at Morehouse, by the way, at Morehouse College, was looking at how termites break down cellulose as basically a model for a mini bioreactor. If we were able to model the enzymatic process that the termites have with cellulose, we'd be able to basically make anything from grass. Okay, so but it's basic research. So all I was doing was just mapping the hindgut. Long story short, I was presenting this research at at Morehouse, and I met with the former director of the MBB program. And once I told her what I was doing, she sat me down and she told me about the program. So I didn't even know what biotech was. You would be surprised. You would be surprised. My brain was uniquely, open to be able to take basically anything, like E. coli with a space in its chromosome. I could take on anything, and I'll be able to then, spit that out. But I didn't know what biotech was, but I was doing research that was adjacent to it. And the fact that I was able to do that, I think, showed the former director that I might be a good candidate. Long story short, we kept in contact, and I applied. And when I found out about what Sempa said with the half business, half science, like I said before, I was already trying to do that with my Bachelor of Science in Psychology. So I said, hold on, this seems like a great opportunity to enter into an industry where I'm needed, where my personality would also be useful, so I can gain technical skills, I can be myself, and there's very little, there's no ceiling. So
wait. There's one piece I'm confused. Bachelor of Science, Psychology.
Yeah.
But you were doing termite research.
yeah, animal behavior.
Okay, so it's animal behavior. So why the termite chooses to chew on the grass?
Yeah. And how do we get them to do it is the first part. How do we get them to even want this? Because it's not normal cellulose. It's cellulose that's tagged with a fluorescent tag. You know what I mean? And mind you, this was also 12 years ago, so I'm hoping I still remember this very well. but yeah, so the animal behavior part was including the termites in it, and then, hey, here I am. I came in riding a termite.
Great. And we had a question. Yes, sir. Great question. So the question is, what type of questions are asked during interviews? So if he wants to get a job, what kind of, you're the hiring manager, what are you going to be asking him?
What job you want? First question. What job are we talking about? So just like any program you're kind of getting to for grad school, you have to tailor your questions. You have to tailor your perspective to where you are in your environment. Okay. So the questions you would have for lab A, if they're doing research X, aren't the same questions you'd have for lab B if they're doing research Y, right? So first and foremost, you have to let your interviewer know that you know them and that you know what they're doing, right? And that you can present value there. Just like Darcy was mentioning, value proposition page 1. That's I think that's the best way. But in order for you to know how you bring value, you have to know the company, right? So do your research. While you're doing your research, find out what your value proposition is. Why you, right? And then from there, the kind of questions that are asked, actually, I'm just going to stop on that and pass the buck to you guys now.
So like your job is in kind of sales and customer support. Maybe questions for you would be different than Simpa, who's in a research position.
I would ask, what's your skill set? What's your experience? How familiar are you with the area? And then, from there, what are your goals?
What about brain teasers? I always heard people would ask things like, you have a bacteria from the moon, how would you determine whether it's, resistant to certain antibiotics or something? Do you ever do any kind of things like that in interviews?
I haven't.
No,
I haven't done
that would be cool though.
So I used to work in what's the broad rubric is something called management consulting. So McKinsey was notorious or famous for asking those types of brain teaser questions. We tend not to do that. For myself, if I'm thinking about someone's coming in with a bachelor's, the first level will be whoever they're reporting directly to, that person will tend to do the technical skills assessment and sort of the value proposition. So by the time I talk to that person, I'm much more interested in cultural fits and trying to figure out, are you a team player? Can I get a sense of, are you going to be able to interact with other folks? And more of what Simba mentioned at the end, where do you want the arc of your career to go, right? So if I'm bringing you in, hopefully, in many ways, I don't want you to want to just stay at the factory and turn a crank for the next 20 years. I want you perhaps can you turn that crank for me for a few years, learn a bunch of fundamental things, but be stimulated enough that you then want to do something else beyond that. And for me, that's exciting because I know that also means while you're turning that crank, you're going to be paying attention to other things. And you might do something, it might be something as simple as things don't smell the same today. Why is it not smelling the same? Because that might be a clue that something's going horribly wrong, that we didn't have the sensors broken that would normally detect some deviation. But because you're like, this isn't normal, it's not in my SOP, it's not in my standard operating procedures, but I know it's different. And if you can then go and tell me or tell someone something different's going on, I want folks who on the one hand, are willing to do those basic things for me, but still maintain their intellectual curiosity.
All right, we have time for one more question. Yes.
How important are journals? Is there like when you're looking at people able to work and like things like even the ones who try to get
Mhm.
so like when you have to know what kind of position?
So the question is, how important is the terminal degree? And I'm paraphrasing, maybe relating that to the position that those persons go into in biomanufacturing.
I can go ahead and start on that. So in general, sort of very general, the higher up you go, sort of the more that people want you to be degree. That very simple proposition on there. Early on, though, the terminal degree doesn't matter so much versus your work habits, right? So people want to see that you're willing to work, you're willing to learn, and those are big clues. But at a certain point, I know this is somewhat just talking about my wife's perspective. She worked at Merck for many years, or not many years, but she worked at Merck. And people would say, your terminal degree doesn't matter. You have an opportunity to go anywhere within the company. In general, that's less true on the R&D side. At some point, if you're really running and want to go high in an R&D organization, rightly or wrongly, because you can learn a lot of things, arguably even more than getting a PhD, people just look at the letters. You can go reasonably far, but if you want to go really far, they really are looking for that. So there are folks who will spend a few years doing a lot of research in which their terminal degree doesn't matter, then they'll leave, get some more skills, and then come back and go up. On the business side, the terminal degree matters less, but at some point, getting that MBA, that becomes the incremental piece. And frankly, for most people, an MBA isn't necessarily a hard degree. Like a PhD can truly be hard. There can truly be moments in which you're like, what did I do? Well, how am I going to solve this problem? I've never heard anyone say that about an MBA. An MBA might be exposure for a few people, like, oh, there's some new math. Where if you've been in engineering or science, that new math is, you're like, this is math? This is not real math. But for some folks who might have had be more from the social sciences, that math may be a little bit challenging. So those are two. So the PhD, if you really want to go far in research, the MBA, if you really want to go far on the business side, tend to be the two. Again, on the business side, terminal degrees matter much less versus are you delivering to the bottom line than the R&D side. And frankly, so just one last thing, on the business side, we can use the profit as sort of a metric. And as long as you keep passing that metric, they keep moving you up. On the R&D side, so many people have to contribute to your success. And it's hard to figure out where was that true moment of genius that's difficult to allocate. So when people are doing reviews, it's harder to make that assessment. So people tend to just look at letters and go, well, that person has the PhD. They must have been the reason for that creative breakthrough. It could have been someone who has no degree who actually did it, but that PhD person put it into the chart, made the pretty presentation, and much of the credit will go to them.
That was a bar. I want people to understand what he just said. I mean, like seriously, in terms of who's going to get the information, who's going to get the credit and stuff like that. And also the politics behind that too. You know, there's almost like some Thomas Edison, but who actually got the light bulb to turn on conversation? You know what I mean? It's those kind of conversations. And I think what Darcy's also saying is that to protect yourself from any issues like that fully, if you're going to go into the R&D tech transfer side of things, PhD, I'd say it's important. I'd say it's important to not cap yourself. Crucial, not necessarily, but when it comes down to the ledger, the report, the receipt, actually mentioning you as the major contributor and value proposition or value added member of the team, you're more likely to get shafted on that. I have to say. So if you have the wherewithal to go for PhD and you feel like you're gonna be like you want to be in the R&D or tech transfer scientist role, I think it's fantastic. Not only that, but also it rises the tide for people coming behind you too. So if you bring that in, it's only gonna make more people who look like you want to do the same thing. So, but it's not something you can manufacture. No pun intended. Like you can't just manufacture the wherewithal to put 6 years into a project. When I tell you 2.5 years in, it will take you out and you'll wonder why you did that, So with that being said, if you don't want to go to a PhD route, there are a variety of different opportunities for you to have a very fruitful and successful career in biotech outside of that first silo.
Absolutely.
All right, great. Well, I'd like to thank all the panelists for taking your valuable time to talk to our students here. And yeah, it's great seeing you all. I'm sure I'll see you in the near future. So thank you. Let's have a round of applause. Hopefully you can hear. Okay.
I have one more thing to say, David. One more thing.
Yes, please.
I want to come to Albany. Okay, so just letting y'all know. And two, I want a picture of the audience if I can have that, David. I think that would warm my heart. That would warm my heart.
Yeah, let's do. I can do maybe a little better. I'm gonna do.
How big of an audience are there? I
We had
apologize for
about
being a couple minutes.
20 or more people. We had some people that had to leave for other classes. I'm going to turn off my background, and then I'm going to see how this may. Hopefully, I won't fall off the stage. But this
Hey
is
now.
Hey.
yeah.
What's up, squad?
All right, yeah. So you kind of get a good feel for that.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. Well, this concludes. Yeah. You hear that? He said you're definitely welcome to come. We'll put you in touch with Ashok, who is my the person invited me here.
Fantastic. Thank
All
y'all.
right.
Yeah, here he is. Here's Ashok.
Hey,
Yeah.
Ashok.
Hey, Ashok.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much. It was very nice.
Yeah, thank you.
You're
Pleasure.
doing important work. The training that you're providing is very important.
Yeah.
Seriously.
No, that's like you guys are behind me. I will
Yeah.
jump on.
Thank you, Ashok.
Well, all right. Have a good day. Thank you all.
Take
Good
care,
luck to all.
David.
Bye.